Today we are on the fifth installment of our lectures on neutrons as proof of condensed matter. Uh, I have talked to you about dynamics using neutron scattering, but before that, I think in the last lecture there are some disruptions. I'll briefly try to go over things I discussed in the last meeting. I'll go over it briefly, and then I'll introduce you to how to bring in dynamics in our formalism, and also about the correlation functions in neutron scattering. This is important, and please bear with me. Those who have got basic initiation in quantum mechanics, things will be fairly simple for them, and those who are not from physics but some other discipline, I'll try to derive the things for you, and a little bit of quantum mechanics I will assume that you know, and I'll go with that knowledge. So last time I said one way the dynamics comes in to any diffraction experiment is through the time dependence of the position coordinate. If you remember, I had an RJT in e to the power minus I g dot Rj. If it is time dependent, it will be having t here. The last few lectures, I did not have this time dependence. I took a frozen set of atoms or scatterers. But now I will introduce this time. When I did that in the last talk, I used this term e to the power minus I g dot Rjt. I broke it up into a part which is time independent. This is the portion which is the frozen lattice side. But I told you earlier that this is the one where you have got a vibration or motion around the lattice side. And then I told you that I need to take a thermal averaging of e to the power minus I g dot u, which is a time dependent part. The thermal averaging basically because this is a fixed lattice point, but due to thermal motion, there is vibration around it. U t is this magnitude, and I expanded the exponential term like this, in which I wrote 1 plus x square by factorial 2. X is minus I g u, so it is minus I g u g dot u square minus half. And then I told you that since this u is symmetric in time, then the average value of gu is g dot u is g u cos theta, and then this g dot u average will give me 0 because it oscillates equally in all the directions, and then this term remains g dot u square, and g dot u square I can do the averaging over the displacement amplitude and the angle with respect to coordinate system individually. Cos square theta average is nothing but cos square theta sin theta d theta d phi 0 to 2 pi on phi minus pi to pi on theta and divided by 1 by 4 pi. that gives me the term 1/3. If you do it, you can see this. So then this expansion becomes 1 minus 1/6 of g square u square, and that adds the term in the amplitude e to the power minus 1/6 g square u square. This gets squared when I calculate intensity, and I get this term e to the power minus 1/3 g square u square multiplied by I0. That means given an intensity at a temperature, lower temperature I0, when with respect to that the displacement is u square, average displacement, the intensity falls by this amount. And also it changes with the increasing value of g. With this, when I showed you this experimental results on silicon crystal, I showed you that one, with respect to temperature, the crystal expand. This is the q axis or the theta axis. The crystal expands, so the peak shifts to lower values, and the peak intensity reduces because of e to the power minus g square 1/3 g square u square term. And also you can see the splitting of the peaks because of the instrumental resolution. So this is one way the dynamics came into our system naturally, and I showed you this experimental setup where actually you measure the neutron beam coming from the reactor here, and then you have a set of position sensitive detector into which you collect the angle resolved data. That means you calculate, you measure intensity of neutrons as a function of angle, no energy analysis. So this is pure structural work. We don't do any energy analysis. Energy is related to time or dynamics. We don't do that here. And what you get is a data which looks like this. In later modules, these things will be taken up in more details. I just want to show you some data. This is the diffraction data, and then I mentioned you that using magnetic form factor, you can also measure magnetic structures using neutrons, and this is the data which has been analyzed for the structure as well as for magnetic moment. But now I would like to go one step ahead to get in motion. How do I bring in dynamics of the system naturally into our formalism? So if you remember, I'll write d2 sigma d omega dE in terms of this factor, which tells me that the neutron from initial state k and the system in its energy lambda. Energy means not only energy but spin, everything, all possible systems, but here energy is important, goes to k prime, the neutron, lambda prime, the system, under the influence of this potential V. This is quantum mechanical. I expect you at least to understand this much basically. And in now I am deviating from what I did earlier. Earlier my magnitude of my k vectors were same because there was no energy exchange. Now I consider there is an energy exchange. Since there is an energy exchange, the magnitude changes, and that's what I've written here. The magnitude of k prime is not equal to magnitude of k. So here I need to bring in the energy conservation of the neutron and the scattering system, and that comes in through this equation. This is an energy conservation equation. non-relativistic energy conservation equation, where the system energy and the neutron energy together, they remain same before and after the scattering. With this, how do I introduce this? Now, please understand this. I would rather use the. You look at this expression, and I'll explain it term by term. So, my this says earlier I was writing d sigma by d omega. This was number of neutrons scattered per unit solid angle. Now I am writing d2 sigma d omega d, number of neutrons scattered per solid angle per energy interval. Now, one term comes k prime by k. This comes because of the flux of neutrons going out per second is given by the velocity, which is h cross k by m. Flux of neutrons coming in is k prime is h cross k, which is the velocity of the neutrons coming in, that this gives the number of neutrons per second going out versus divided by number of neutrons coming in. Now comes the scattering potential, and that is what I wrote earlier. This was k prime lambda prime sigma prime v k lambda sigma, a square of that, because I am putting cross section here and not an amplitude square here. There is a square here, and I am putting a delta function by hand to bring in the energy conservation. So this I have put by hand in my equation. Now I'll go back to the transparency, and so note it. So all other things you will understand clear. Other terms I will explain. This was to make the flux. This is an constant we know because we write our potential as 2 pi h square by m. This is a numerical factor to just cancel it out, no problem. I have to add up over all probabilities for the initial state of the system and the neutron, and add up also over all the final possible states of and the neutrons, then the square term, what I showed you, and then the delta function. Now I do a this delta function is Dirac delta function, you know. People who are familiar, little bit familiar with physics and quantum mechanics will know. So this delta function has been brought in to ensure the energy conservation during scattering. And now I represent this delta function as an integral, which is a very common representation. This is delta h cross omega plus c lambda minus c lambda prime can be written down as an integration over time of e to the power minus I t h cross omega plus c lambda plus c lambda prime. This is the integral representation of delta function. Accept it. Those who you know, you it's okay. Those who don't know, accept it. Because once you accept it, then I can take you forward and show you how this delta function gives me the correlations in the system. So I show you again. This is my master formula. This is the delta function. I use V of r, which is I am deviating slightly from the assumption that the V of r is a delta function. I take a general form of V of r and I introduce the Fourier transform of this V of r. So my V of r is still localized around some Rj values which are dynamical. Basically, this can have time component, how I'll see, and this is a sum over scatterers. So my system is an assembly of scatterers. I don't know whether periodic or aperiodic, and these are the RJs that I define my V with. Once I say that, then VJQ is equal to is a Fourier transform of this potential. So I define VJQ like this in my equations, in my master formula. Then I come here. So as I wrote here that I'm working with the Fourier transform of the potential. Remember, this is what gave us structure factors when we discuss diffraction. Right now, this is a more generalized term, and I'll get back diffraction if I consider it only at time t equal to 0. I'll show you that. So now I will expand this term. I will do this for you. Let me start writing down. I'll write it down. Otherwise, it doesn't become clear. So I introduced you to this term under delta function. And I wrote down an integral form of delta function, which is when I plug this in the master equation, then what I will get is And I told you that this integral, when I break it up into square, what I will get is, with the insertion of this delta function, it will be I know some of you might get a little foxed with these terms, but please bear with me for few more transparencies. Then things will become much easier, and we can make some generalized conclusions. What I will get is, so I have brought in a time integral by defining my delta function in an integral form. Now this is the Fourier transform multiplied by so what I did actually, I introduced an integral for the delta function, and I had three terms there. I had E lambda prime, I had E lambda, and I have brought it inside this averaging brackets. Now I'll write down, please notice this term. There are also sums over J prime, and then there will be, but please notice this term. I'll go back to the transparency because here it is not so clear. So this is the one which I was trying to write down in longhand, and please notice this term. Please notice this term. This is known as time operator. This gives the time evolution of the operator. If I mean this position as an operator, time evolution of an operator. Why so? I'll just quickly explain to you. In quantum mechanics, we know that the time evolution of a wave function psi of where the system energy is E is given by but we know that if psi is an eigenfunction of the Hamiltonian, the psi of R and T is given by this. So if I take a complex conjugate of that, will give me psi dagger of RT. And I know that at any instant, if I club these two things, now I have got an operator of position between now this is exactly same as because H psi is equal to E psi. Now that this gives me the time operator because this whole thing gives me the value of this position operator at a time t. So now I have been able to introduce time t with my position through this manipulation. So let me go back. So here I have come this far, which I showed you just now, and this gives me so this is the part I was discussing about. So I have the potentials, and this brings in the time for the operator, position operator. So I am able to plug in time dependence in the operator of RJ, and now what I have got. So now I have got an expression which is, this is an averaging over the initial. So this is an averaging between sites, and this averaging comes because of at the ends. But I also have an exponential minus beta Ez by lambda, Ez by Z, E lambda by Z, which is basically the statistical weight factor for initial state of energy E lambda, and I showed it here. It's a Boltzmann factor. Basically, when I'm evaluating this scattering cross section, I have to find out the probability of the initial state. First, I have to sum over all initial states. I have to get probability of all the initial states. Then I have to multiply it by the probability of transition to all the final states. I have to sum up over all the final states. This is the hierarchy of operations. I am not doing anything right now, but all I am saying that in this, I have now plugged in the time dependence with the operator Rj prime. Once I have done it, so now this is the Boltzmann factor. This is the average of the average over the potential, which is not yet a delta function, and we have to find out e to the power minus I q dot rj0, e to the power I q dot rj prime t, sum over all possible scatterers. So for a simpler case, if I take away the the site dependence of the potential, then this expression gives me an n k prime by k m by 2 pi vq square, because there is no site dependence. The vq square average of that, and I write something called sq omega, which is a scattering law, which I am calling a scattering law. What is the scattering law? So this is what dictates all sorts of scattering from the system that you are going to study. So I'll write it down now explicitly. You see, this sq omega is a time Fourier transform of exponential minus q dot rj0, exponential I q dot rj prime. This should be prime, j prime, this is j prime at time t, and then I'm also defining that g of rt, which is the inverse Fourier transform. I'm going from q space to r space, integrating over q of this value. Now, what is this value? What is this quantity? Because now I can write down my scattering law sq omega as a double Fourier transform of a quantity g of rt. So please understand this. This is the ultimate take. You can forget about all the derivation that I did, but this is the ultimate take which you have to understand, and for any kind of experiment you have to consider this and plan. So I have a g of rt. Again and again I am writing g of rt. Those who are familiar with quantum mechanics, who are familiar with the term Green's propagator. I'll come to the physical description it shortly. And I have got an S of q omega, scattering law. This is related to d2 sigma d omega dE. So this is what I measure. I measure in q omega space. And what I want to know is g of RT, how the function, how the system behaves in real space and time. And they are a double Fourier inversion between them. One is e to the power minus I omega t and one is e to the power I q dot r. Either I integrate over omega, I go to t, or I integrate over q, I go to r, or I integrate over r, I go to q, I integrate over time, I go to omega. They are double Fourier transform each other. So this is the only take from all the calculations that I have been doing. I have shown you how I have gone about. So let me again tell you, I assume, not I assume, I by my hand I have put a delta function in your scattering function k prime lambda prime sigma prime v k lambda sigma to conserve energy. After that, the delta function I represent it as an integral over I omega t e lambda minus e lambda prime plus h cross omega. Then this e lambda prime t and e lambda t, I took it inside the averaging of lambda prime lambda, and I showed you that this becomes e to the power minus I h t by h cross into a function e to the power I q dot rj e to the power I h t by h cross lambda. And the central part, it's nothing but it gives the time evolution of the operator rj. After that, I defined an S of q omega, I defined a g of rt, and I showed you this S of q omega is basically measuring. I'll again go back. So this is what this S of q omega, if I take out these terms, this average value of v q square will actually, in our previous case, what I did, if you see this, so this average, you remember I had introduced v equal to sum over j twice pi h square by m delta r minus rj. This vq square will actually, if I forget about the time, here there is no time, it will take me back to b average square plus delta j prime b square average minus b average square, what I talked to you for all the previous lectures, it will take me there. But we have an added thing, this is sq omega. This sq omega, if I take out time, then it will be only s of q, and I'll go back to d sigma by d omega. But now I have introduced time, I have introduced frequency through a Fourier transform. H cross omega is the energy transfer, and when I do that, then I have reached here, and this is what I mean. That now your scattering law, which is directly related to the measurement, is nothing but a double Fourier transform over g of r and t. So this is the take in this talk, and this is the correlation function. This is the real space correlation function, which gives me the scattering law in q omega space, which is the space in which my measurements are taking place. So when you do a measurement, you prepare a neutron beam of a given wavelength in a certain direction with a certain energy. So it defines your k and lambda. The scattering takes place, then you have a neutron beam which has gone out from the system, which is in a certain direction, which dictates k prime, and with an energy which is E lambda prime. If you talk about diffraction, we don't consider the energy transfer, then the magnitude of k prime and magnitude of k, they are exactly same, and that is diffraction. But if they are not same, then I am measuring SQ omega. How? I'll come to that later. And my role, my attempt is to get back at this, how the function behaves in real space and time. When I say space, it's structure. When I say time, it is dynamics in the system. So I will introduce one more step, because the double Fourier transform I'll break up into two parts, two Fourier steps. One is that I define an IQT, which is transform. Sorry, here it somehow its bracket has appeared. It will look like dr e to the power I q dot r g of r comma t. So this is a space Fourier transform of g of r t. So vice versa, this is IQT. If I do IQT e to the power minus IQ dot r dq, then I will go to g of r t. They're the Fourier inverse of each other. And then one more step of Fourier inversion of IQT, that is one more Fourier transform will take me to S of q omega. Once you are able to digest this much, then we can do some very interesting analysis, which I'll come to shortly. So as I said, that S of q omega is a Fourier transform over I of qt. Again, this this is not there. Somehow when you're transferring. So now I have got S of q omega, which is the measured space, I of qt, and intermediate scattering function, and g of rt, the desired correlation in real space. This is known as Green's propagator. Basically, this tells me how the system evolves in time and space, and this gives me the experimental result, and they are Fourier transform of each other. I'll stop now. And I'll request you to ask me questions at this point, because this is important for you to understand that experiments are done in q omega space, but actually this experimental results depend on the real space correlations, which is given by g of rt, and we are trying to come back to g of rt from S of q omega. So I will stop, and please, any confusion, ask questions right now through chat. I'm requesting my gentleman who is helping me, please ask questions. Any questions? Anything? No question at all. Uh, you can do it from thermal neutron scattering by Marshall and Lovesey. You can see it at Methods of Experimental Physics, volume 23A, edited by, I'll write down. This is one. And there's a whole volume of body work. And Kurt Coelho. So here the first chapter. So this is the correlation function, which basically earlier I talked to you about X-ray diffraction. And in X-ray diffraction, I showed you the pair correlation function or the electron density, the Fourier transform of that gave us the diffraction pattern. Here, I have gone one step ahead, and this was shown by Leon Vanov in a seminal paper in 1952, that if you talk about a G of RT in real space, the double Fourier transform of G of RT gives us the scattering law for a system. No questions, right? I'll still, I, I'm, I have confidence in you, but I think many of you may be a little confused. I know because I myself was confused when I was doing it 30 years back, 30, 40 years back. So please ask. You are not asking now. You can read these books. You will clearly understand. If you can, the assignments will be uploaded today, and I'll give you 1 week time to send it. So I will discuss those assignments only on next Wednesday, and you can, meanwhile, you can see, look at the lectures. Any confusion? You can also post me your queries at neutroncourse@gmail.com. So I'll be waiting for your questions because I expect questions on this. So I have S of q omega, I of qt, G of RT, and we measure experimentally S of q omega in all the sources. Now let's look at an interesting thing. Uh, from the relationship that I showed you, S of q omega equal to dt e to the power minus I omega t iqt, right? So here, or I can write it inversely. IQT is nothing but the Fourier transform of the real space information as a function of time. That R has been replaced by T. So I have two Fourier transforms, 1 over omega, 1 over t. So now if I write S of q omega 0, S of q, no energy transfer. This is nothing but time, because e to the power I omega t for omega equal to 0 has vanished. So this is a dt e to the and iqt. So this is a time integral of intermediate scattering function or the structure. On the other hand, if I write iq t equal to 0, because then it was e to the power I omega t d omega, again t equal to 0, e to the power minus I omega t disappears. It is an integral omega. So this is an integral over energy of S of q omega. These are two different experiments. But what it says, so I can do an experiment where I ensure that the energy transfer is 0. How? So I take an incoming, so I take an incoming neutron of some energy, of some wavelength. It goes in some direction. I don't know the energy, but I put a filter here. What is that filter? You don't know, but I put a filter here. I ensure that the neutron goes out with an energy E, and then it is detected in a detector. This is one experiment. I have ensured omega equal to 0. That gives me the integrated picture of the time integrated picture of the system. That means it integrates over all time and gives me this. This is what quantum mechanics is. On the other hand, I do one more experiment in which I have a neutron beam, there is a sample, it is scattered, and I straight I put it in a detector. I don't discriminate any energies, I take all energies in. That means I do an integration over omega. This gives me an instantaneous picture. So this is an instantaneous picture. So one gives me average over time, one gives me instantaneous picture. Will I see different diffraction patterns? No. Reason is that when you see omega equal to 0, anyway the time averaging is done. When you see integrated one at t equal to 0, you imagine you are taking snapshots after snapshots after snapshots after snapshots. Your system time is much smaller than my measurement time in a detector. So I again do a time integration and the averaging is done. So both of them give me same thing, but I approach it from two different directions. One gives a snapshot and I keep on adding snapshots. So when I keep on adding snapshot, I get the time average picture. Or when I do q omega equal to 0 experiment, the system itself takes care, the experimental design takes care of the time averaging and I get a time average picture. So this is what we get from today's derivation. So this is how the correlation functions work. Uh, I will try to go through the quickly to tell you what are the other properties of the correlation function. So I will not load you uh, with the quantum mechanical treatment of G of RT, because then I cannot take the commutability of Rj and Rj prime in my system, and I have to do very elaborate algebra to bring into that. I'm just talking about classical G of RT. What is G of RT? Basically, G of RT is a system average. Is a system average of a delta function. What is the delta function? This delta function clicks when R is equal to Rj0 minus Rj prime t. So you have your system. You have system of scatterers. So I'm asking the question, whenever this R is equal to Rj prime minus Rj. Then this delta function is 1. It just maps this correlation. Whenever the delta R, this variable, is equal to distance between two atoms, can be same atoms also, J can be equal to J prime, then it clicks to 1. So I'll just take a simple example. Let us take a case of a liquid, because things become very obvious and clear to understand. Say, case of a liquid, one is that at when I talk about time t equal to 0, when the time t equal to 0, then the self correlation function is a delta function. That means a particle at t equal to 0 is correlated only with itself. Another thing is that when I take the complete Green's function, total Green's function, and talk about time t equal to 0, this is like what we did in diffraction for a series of delta function potentials. So this one part is the self, is the when R equal to Rj, that is the delta function, but other one is the pair correlation function. It's called a pair correlation function. That means this gives me how pairs are distributed in a system. So if it is a crystal lattice, then it will give me the interatomic distances. Otherwise, in any other system, for example, if it is a amorphous system, still there are, or a liquid, there are short range correlations, and at t equal to 0, that will give me the short range correlation. Here I'll stop now, and again my request to you, my humble request to you, now onwards we'll move into experiments with this much of introduction to the correlation functions. Now you will see the actual experimental setups that I'll describe to you, different Q ranges, because now you can see that when I talk about G of RT, it envisages many time scales. It envisages many Q ranges. So I have got a whole lot of Q range and the whole lot of time range to talk about, and the Fourier transform of that will give me the S of Q omega. But we cannot have a one generalized machine which will give me all the answers. No, that's not possible. It's like saying that I cannot measure million volts and millivolts using the same device. I need a different kind of electrometer. Similarly, to attack various ranges of Q, to attack various ranges of time, that means various ranges of dynamics, I need many instruments. And next, I will get into a generalized description of this instrument. The special property of this instrument will be taught to you in details by the other lecturers, but I'll introduce you briefly to them. I'll also introduce you to the structure and how things work at a reactor, how neutrons are transported, how the instruments are designed, and I'll also tell you how to detect neutrons. Points to ponder that neutron is a chargeless particle. So, like today, a lot of attempt goes on measuring neutrino, which interacts very less. Neutrons also, you need special techniques to detect them because they're neutral. It is easy to detect gamma rays. It is easy to detect charged particles because they have Coulomb interaction. They polarize, they create charged particles. I can make detectors. So neutron detectors, they're special class of materials, and that all those introductions will be for the remaining lectures of mine. Bye.